one of these questions asked, is there a book you remember having to read, but you don't actually remember the book? And I'm like, you guys, that is sort of kind of the way I'm going to be treating this entire tag. I don't remember. I don't remember most of this stuff. Sandy says, read, and welcome to the channel. This afternoon, I've been filming for a long time today. This evening, we are going to do a booktube tag. And you guys, you are going to hear my tummy growl and grumble through this tag because my dinner is cooking in the other room and it smells really good. And I'm ready for dinner. Okay, let's look. Hold on. We're going to look on the screen here to make sure I get this right. This is the high school required reading tag. This was originated with Nicole at Noteworthy Fiction and Alex at, you guys, Alex at Stay at Home Reader. I just looked at the screen and was about to say stay thermometer. No. It's been a day. Okay, but Alex at Stay at Home Reader and Nicole at Noteworthy Fiction started this tag for us. And they started this tag for us, I want to say like 2 months ago, right? It's been a little while. I'm late to the party. I was tagged by Pat over at Book Chat with Pat. She did this tag a little bit ago. And I guess we could dive into the prompts. Maybe I should preempt this by saying, I can't remember. The theme, you will pick up on the theme of this tag quickly here. I can't remember a lot of this stuff. I went through, I read through the prompts. I've listened to a couple of other booktubers doing this tag. And as I was listening to the other booktubers, I'm like, oh yeah, we read that book. Oh yeah, we read Uncle Tom's Cabin. Oh yeah, we read To Kill a Mockingbird. I have so much to say about To Kill a Mockingbird. I mean, we read some of these books that other booktubers are talking about, but then I had to stop and think, okay, was that in high school? Was that in college? Okay, was that during the summer or was that an assigned book? I can't remember. I don't remember. Okay, yeah, there's even one of these questions. Let's see. One of these questions asks, where is it? Locker, is there a book you remember having to read but can't actually remember? Yeah. We'll chat about that. Okay, so let's look at something I do remember. I kept this book all these years. This is Adventures in English Literature, the Heritage Edition Revised. I'm going to show it to you guys. I don't know if there's a glare on it. There probably is, so I'll just wave it around a little bit. But this thing was one of my literature classes in high school. We had this huge book. It is quite heavy. It's quite dense and full of stuff. Oh, look, there's notes in it, you guys. Hold on. Hang on. You guys, what is this? Count That Day Lost by George Eliot. Oh, okay. I think maybe I put this in here when we were doing poetry readings back in 2020. Why is that coming to me? Okay, I think maybe we read this together. Because, back in 2020, when we were all locked down during the month of April, I was doing poetry readings every day. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, guys. Hang on. We're discovering this together. I might cut this out. I might not. You never know. Let's get back to the tag. You guys don't want to sit here and watch me relive this stuff. Okay. The Adventures in Literature program was the textbook that we had in one of my literature classes. And in here, as a textbook would have, is, the excerpts from stories, excerpts from books, excerpts from great works of literature. Like, I just opened a Beowulf. Okay, Beowulf. So in high school, that sort of reading was taking place, as well as reading full novel length works. Okay. So some of these questions, ask about reading a book in high school. I'm like, well, did we read all of that in that class? Or did we just do the excerpt from the literature book in that class? That kind of stuff was going through my brain while I was thinking about these prompts. Also, while I was thinking about these prompts, I need to tell you guys, My high school and junior high careers were split up a little bit differently than most people's high school careers were split up. I went to junior high school at Hazelwood Junior High in Missouri for 7th and 8th grade. Fine, right? As you would. But then my family moved to another city before I went into high school. For 9th grade, my freshman year, we went to a new school district, and that school district separated things differently. And 9th grade was still in junior high. So 7th, 8th, and 9th grades were at this one school. And I don't even remember the name of it. I've suppressed that. I've suppressed a lot from high school. Okay. I was a nerd and I was bullied a lot in high school. So I've suppressed so much from my high school life. Okay. So 9th grade, 7th, 8th, 9th grade were in that school together. And so 9th grade stuff, technically that's high school, but it wasn't. It was still junior high. So when I think about junior high, I'm thinking junior high school things, and they're all kind of congealing in one mass, but different schools. And then high school was, 10, 11, 12 in another school. Okay. Then I was reading in the summers, like in summer breaks. So when I'm thinking about the answers to these questions, you guys, my brain is just one confusing mass of blur. Yeah. So I'm going to answer these questions the best I can. And we're going to talk about books. That's going to be the fun, entertaining part. We're going to talk about books. Even if I screw up the questions and can't remember exact dates, because I can't do dates and numbers, we're going to have fun talking about books and exploring books together, because books are great. So let's dive into the prompts. All that caveat done. Let's dive into the prompts. Number 1, high school crush. Name a book you were assigned in high school and loved at the time. Have you reread it, and did it hold up? Guys, I don't know. There's our theme. I don't know. When I was in high school, so 10, 11, 12, I don't remember which book I loved the most was assigned to us in high school. I don't remember. There were several. I don't remember, you guys. High school, I don't remember. There were tons of books I read during that time frame, during that age, that I loved. Plenty. I loved most of the books I read back then. I loved them, but I don't remember which ones were assigned in classes that I loved. I don't remember. So we're going to move on to number 2. I've got a stack of books here that we're going to talk about as we go through this, I'm hoping. Okay, number 2, gym class. Name a book you were assigned that you hated. Have or would you give it a second chance? Now, I didn't necessarily hate this book. We were assigned to read Thoreau in high school. This was high school. I remember, I can't remember the teacher's name, but Mrs. Thompson. I can't remember the teacher's name. I can picture her in my mind. I remember reading Thoreau in her class. I remember that, but I did not enjoy it much. It was very dry. Oh gosh, I've got it underlined in some spots. It was very dry to my high school tastes. Now I have gone through and picked bits and pieces of it, passages of it since then. And, it's fine. It's okay. I don't mind it. And whatever. It's very Dead Poet Society feeling to me, right? And that's fine. I'm not knocking it, okay? I didn't hate it. Were there any books in high school that I hated? I don't know. There were some textbooks in high school that I hated. Can I answer that question here? Is that okay? Can I do that? Let's do that. Let's talk about that here. There was a chemistry textbook that we read in class. I hated that. That was confusing and difficult. And I mean, it was chemistry. So, you're just gaining knowledge out of it. You're picking knowledge from it. And I remember the teacher, it was a new textbook, new for that year. And I remember the teacher at the front of the classroom complaining, telling us, because we were reading out loud from it in class, like each person would read a chunk, like she would call on you and you'd read a chunk. Call on this person, they would read a chunk. And it was difficult because, and she complained about this, she pointed out to us, she didn't like that the authors had chosen to use iron as the example element to talk about ions. I remember that to this day. And that was like, what, 1984, 1985, 1986? Okay. Yeah, I remember that to this day. That was what, and she was complaining about it. And I'm in the classroom, I'm thinking, I agree. It is confusing. This is confusing stuff. Okay. I hated the chemistry book. Shall we move on to number 3? Let's set this over here. Number 3, locker combo. Is there a book you remember having to read? Oh, here's our question. But can't actually remember. And I think MacBeth. Yeah, I know for a fact that we read MacBeth. I know this for a fact because there was a student in school, can't remember his name, but I remember he was in like speech and debate and acting and stuff like that. And he was in all the school plays and he would like dramatize everything we read in class. And I remember him dramatizing stuff, and MacBeth was a thing he dramatized. Here's the thing. I don't remember much of MacBeth. I remember things out here in society, right? I mean, out here in society, there are things from MacBeth that you say, you know, out, damn spot, right? I mean, there are things like that that you say out here in the world that I know are from that play. But I don't remember all the bits and pieces of the play. And as an English major, I probably should go back and reread it again. But there are so many other things to read that I just haven't. I'm a Chaucer fan more than a Shakespeare fan. I'm not saying Shakespeare is not good. I'm just saying I prefer Chaucer. Number 4, CliffNotes. Was there a book you were supposed to read but didn't? Yes, there is. And I've talked about that here on this channel before. Grapes of Wrath, Steinbeck. Here's the thing. I read this one summer. So I did read it. It was on the shelf. I wonder if this is the actual book. Did my parents let me take this away? It was on the shelf in my parents' house, and I was bored to tears in the summer. I mean, I wasn't allowed to do anything when I was a kid. That's another story for another day, but I was sitting around in the summer, and so I just pulled this off the shelf and read it. And I'm going to answer another question with this one later, but when I got to college, so this wasn't high school, this was college. In a college class, we read Grapes of Wrath. Well, members of the class did. I didn't reread this because I enjoyed it enough, but not enough to reread it. Let's put it that way. It's a depressing book, right? I mean, come on, it's the depression. And yeah. But in class, the professor called on every single one of us, like went around the room and had every single person say something from the books, talk about something in the book that stuck with you. He wanted us to each talk about something out of the book that made an impression and stuck with us from having read it. And I'm sitting in the classroom going, oh, good thing I read that earlier in life. And so I did talk about the scene. I think I've mentioned this on the channel. I talked about the scene where the main family is in an encampment and the mother is able to make a stew for her family. And there are kids in the encampment who are starving, and they gather around and are watching the family eat. And when the family's done eating, the stew is all gone, but there's like leavings in the pot. The pot is not clean. So she gives the pot to these starving kids, and the kids lick it clean completely. And when they go back to their families in the other parts of the encampment, they smell of food. They have the scent of food on them. It's on their breath, their fingers, whatever. And their families get pissed off. Their families are mad because these kids smell of food they have eaten. And so those families, some of the family members come to the mother and they're like, how dare you? How dare you give food to our children? Because now our children are in our camps and they smell of food and it's making us hungrier. And I was startled by that. I was taken aback by that because as a parent, you are supposed to care for your child. You are supposed to want the best for your child. If your child is starving and someone gives them some food, some nutritious food, you should be thankful that that has happened, that your child is not going to die of starvation tonight. So it's stuck with me. It has stuck with me still, but it stuck with me when I read it during the summers. So when I got to college and I was in that class and put on the spot, I'm like, oh God. And so I was able to talk about that. There we go. Okay. Shall we move on to number 5, electives. Did you read just for fun? Of course. What books were you reading outside of your assignments? All of them. I was reading during the summers, reading all kinds of books outside of my assignments. One of those books was Jane Eyre. I read Jane Eyre during the summers, during one of the summers between high school years. And I've got it over here, right? I did bring it. Yes, hang on. I brought you guys these to look at. My most recent acquisition is the Black Spine edition of Jane Eyre. We go from Jumpmaster Press. There's that. Just simple, lovely Jane Eyre. So I was reading Jane Eyre, loved it, of course. And when I did that, I was like on a Bronte tear. I wanted to read all the Brontes and all the Bronte stuff. Since I learned, discovered, oh my gosh, she had sisters, yay. And then I think we read Wuthering Heights in high school. I think this was high school. I don't think this was college. I think this was high school when we read Wuthering Heights. So many books I was reading outside of my assignments. Helen Keller, I was reading that. I was rereading that one. I was reading the Little House books. I reread those. My sister had the Belgariad series and the Malloreon series. I read those because they were in the house. I was reading all kinds of books outside of, I was reading all kinds of books outside of the assigned readings. All right, let's go to number 6, rebound. What book would you replace from the typical assigned reading list? Oh, okay. What book would I replace? Okay, I don't know what's on the assigned reading list today in high schools and junior highs. I don't know what's on the assigned reading lists. I don't have children, so I don't have a kid in the school system, so I don't know what's there at the moment. I would replace. I don't know that I wouldn't want to replace anything. I would just want to add. And I know that's not what any kid in school wants to hear. Don't add more work for us. But I would want them to read Anne Bronte's The Tenant of Wildfell Hall for sure. There's so much commentary you can make on The Tenant of Wildfell Hall that I think is important for both girls and boys to hear and to read and to internalize and to learn from and encapsulate in their souls. Yeah, I would definitely recommend putting on the list at least The Tenant of Wildfell Hall for sure. I also, and not everyone will agree with me, but I think that older kids should be taught the real Anthony Fauci. Now, whether or not you worship at the altar of Anthony Fauci, whether or not you worship at the altar of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., whether or not you worship at the altar of Bill Gates, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I don't care where anyone falls on the spectrum of worshiping any of these people. I worship none of them. So it's just an interesting book. It's an interesting look at how one person so very much affected like the AIDS. There's just so much in here. I really think youth should get to read about this man and get to read about not just what he influenced, but how he influenced it. Yeah, definitely. I definitely think that's a good one for older kids because it's pretty dense. I mean, there's a lot of like footnotes and bibliography stuff, and it's a pretty dense book. So yeah, an older kid would probably be able to read it better than a younger high schooler. Next, number 7. Are we up to number 7? Teacher's Pet. Teacher's Pet. What book got you excited about reading for class? All of them, but I did select To Kill a Mockingbird to talk about. because when I was in 9th grade, so junior high, but freshman, our teacher, Mrs. Trupiano, I think it was Mrs. Trupiano, was reading this to us and having us read it in class. So we were going around the room and each person would read a paragraph. So you had to pay attention. Everyone had to pay attention. This was a good exercise in making us pay attention and read. So each person read a paragraph and you had to, pay attention so you knew where you were in the story. And I thought that was cool and clever to make sure we all read the story, but we also, read it at home on our own. And I enjoyed the book. I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the activity we had to do for this book. We, let's see, so 9th grade, we had 3 language arts classes in the school, or 3 language arts teachers in the school, and each language arts teacher had, so there were 8 periods in the day, so 7, because you had an hour break at lunch, so 7 classes, so 7 times 3, that's 21. Look at me doing math on camera. So there's 21 classes reading To Kill a Mockingbird. So 21 classes of students. And I don't know, we had maybe 22, 25 kids in my class, right? So it's a lot of students reading To Kill a Mockingbird. And each one of us had to do a project based on the book. And the project, there were a list of projects you could choose from in this project list, right? Okay, you get it. My friend Julie, I remember Julie did this thing. This was pre-internet, okay? This was like 1984, because this was junior high, 9th grade. She took one of the scenes where they're having a cake and she investigated, she researched that particular cake and the ingredients for it. And she came up with a recipe and she went and bought the ingredients and baked this cake, and like brought it into class, and everyone could have a little piece of this cake. And it was delightful. And she won a prize for that. I, at the age of 14, wrote a sequel to Kill a Mockingbird. That was my project. I wrote a sequel. I wrote a sequel where a scout was an adult. She had grown up, and don't remember now what her struggle was, but she had a struggle. There had to be conflict, or she had a struggle with the happenings of that summer from her youth. Yeah. That ribbon back here, that's, I don't know if you can see it because I don't have the screen up. That ribbon back here is from my first place prize for that story. The story itself is long gone. During my teenage years, everything that I had like written down, like a story or a fantasy or any of my writing stuff, was destroyed and thrown away. So that story is long gone, but the ribbon remains. The ribbon was an academic thing, so it was kept, and it's with me now. Yeah, there it is. Let's move on. Okay, so To Kill a Mockingbird would get me excited about reading for class. Then number 8, study hall. What was the most difficult book you read in high school? The one you spent the most time studying? That's probably that chemistry book that we were talking about a minute ago. Yeah, chemistry or physics, my physics book. That was, man, there were some dense texts that we had to read for classes. I know this is supposed to be literature, but I mean, the literature books that we read, I mean, none of them were difficult, right? I mean, we read the Scarlet Letter. I brought the Scarlet Letter here for some reason, but that wasn't, I mean, it wasn't really difficult. These weren't really difficult. They were, I mean, some of them were longer than others, but none of them were really difficult. The one you spent the most time studying. Which one did we spend the most time studying? I don't know. I don't remember. Let's move on to number 9, Nails on a Chalkboard. What was the book that made you groan when you found out you'd have to read it again? That was Grapes of Wrath, for sure. No, that was college, but that was Grapes of Wrath. I groaned, and I didn't reread it at that time. Number 10, extra credit. What book do you think should be added on to every high school reading list? I've got that right here, The Book Thief. I think that The Book Thief by Marcus Zuzak, I think that it should be a companion to The Diary of a Young Girl, Anne Frank. I think that when I'm assuming that schools still read Anne Frank, I'm assuming that. I would hope that schools are still reading The Diary of Anne Frank. And as a companion book to it, I think they should be reading The Book Thief. It's just so well written. It tugs at your heartstrings. It is a gritty, like realistic look at, I mean, fictionalized, but realistic look at war and just horrible war. Yeah. So I think that The Book Thief should be added to as a companion piece to The Diary of Anne Frank. And if schools are not reading The Diary of Anne Frank anymore, they need to put it back on the list, in my opinion. Number 11, BFFs. Tag some people you'd like to hear answers from. I am pretty sure that I'm the last person to do this. If I'm not the last person to do this, I'm second to last. So I don't know who I would tag at this point. I think everyone who was going to do this tag already knows that it exists and has already been tagging one another. I think that's it, you guys. Thumbs up for trying to get me to remember stuff. Thumbs up for Sandy's memory. Thank you so much for tuning in.